So hello everybody again. Last time we discussed about neuroanatomy and the brain centers, the well-being center or the happiness center of the brain. I hope it kept you happy for all this while. Today we will be discussing neurochemistry of well-being, and which in turn has three different aspects: neurotransmitters, food for thought, literally, and cleanup of the brain or the detox of the brain. Let us understand the neuronal functioning, how the brain functions at the cellular level. So the brain cells are called neurons. There are 86 billion neurons in every brain, yours, mine, everybody. The intellect we have, the performance we have is only dependent on how many neurons we use and how many of them are sleeping. Neurogenesis, that is formation of new neurons, is a known fact now as against before, but it is as per demand. They are formed only if you need it. Neuroplasticity is again an amazing tool. We can actually make neurons learn new functions which was not their function if some neurons die. The best example we have is a stroke patient where you have a paralysis and that limb functions can be taken over by the other side neurons by teaching them to do that function. So this is called plasticity of the brain. Any cell of the brain can do any function, can be taught any function. Amazing. Also, we can develop as many connections as we want. We can put challenges, do multitasks. The more tasks we take at hand, more connections develop. More repetitions of the task, stronger the connections develop. And finally, the most surprising aspect of the brain connections is that most of these functions are inhibitory functions. So why does the brain need to have a lot of stoppage or inhibitory function? Now the theory is our brain is bombarded with information non-stop from all senses. And when we want to focus on certain tasks or we are doing something at hand, we need to filter out this unnecessary bombardment of information which could distract us. So most of the neurons have this function of helping us prioritize by filtering out these unnecessary information overloads. So most of the neurons have the filters of stopping the further conduction of messages. From that, we begin to understand how the neurons conduct messages to each other. So these are two neurons on the left hand side you see. One neuron does not physically touch or connect to the other neuron. They have a little gap, and that is called a synapse or a synaptic cleft. The message conduction inside the neuron is electrical potential, while in the synaptic gap or the synapse, as there is no touch, the message is conducted chemically with neurotransmitters, which are chemicals also called as neurohormones. Again, once the message is conducted chemically to the next neuron, it itself conducts the message further electrically again until it reaches the next synapse. So these neurotransmitters have an important role of conducting messages. So these are also called chemical messengers. Now these have two types of functions: excitatory neurons and inhibitory neurons. As we saw, excitatory neurons have lesser functions while inhibitory neurons are working all the time. They have a lot of function of filtration and prioritization. These are some of the names which we can learn, remember, but there are few important ones which we will be talking about because they are concerned with wellness or well-being of the brain. So the happiness hormone triad. So the most important hormones for our happiness or feelings of well-being are serotonin, endorphins, and dopamine. There are many more like oxytocin or GABA or noradrenaline, but here we will restrict ourselves to these three because these three are the most important ones. Let's talk about serotonin. Serotonin is the key hormone that stabilizes our mood, feelings of well-being and happiness. It enables brain cells and other nervous system cells to communicate with each other as chemical messengers. It helps in sleeping as serotonin is a precursor for melatonin, which is the sleep hormone. Serotonin also helps in eating and digestion, as 90% of the body's serotonin is made in the gut and then sent to the brain. What releases serotonin in the body? How do we get more serotonin in the body? More the better, isn't it? So, exposure to bright sunlight, regular exercise, healthy diets which include tryptophan like eggs, cheese, turkey, nuts, salmon, tofu and pineapple help release serotonin in the body. Also, meditation relieves stress, and a positive outlook on life with it, without the stressful factors, also boosts up serotonin. So it's a feedback loop. You have less stress, you feel relaxed, you make more serotonin. Next, we talk about endorphins. Endorphins act on the opiate receptors in our brain. They reduce pain and boost pleasure, resulting in a feeling of well-being. Endorphins are involved in our natural reward circuits and are related to important activities like eating, drinking, physical fitness. We are more likely to do an activity if it makes us feel good. This was the evolutionary standpoint which ensured our survival. We went for hunting, gathering, we ran, we tired ourselves, but it gave an endorphin boost which made us do it again and again and feed ourselves for survival. Also, humans are social creatures and we thrive in communities. Endorphins have been shown to also help social attachments. How are endorphins released? How do they come into your body? Moderate exercise, meditation again, long hot baths, sunlight, aromatic essential oil essence, massage, performing music like singing to oneself, also good, performing acts of kindness, there is more, watching emotionally stirring dramas, more endorphins, sexual act, acupuncture, walking barefoot, earthing with soil, grass, sand, laughing, dark chocolate, wine. These are the sources for endorphins. Then comes the final one, dopamine. It is called the feel-good hormone. Dopamine is a hormone and a neurotransmitter that's important for your brain's reward system. It is also associated with pleasure sensations along with learning, memory, motor system function and more things. Now I give this a dazed smiley look because it is an important neurohormone which hooks you up. It is the addiction hormone. Here is where you get addicted to sugar, you get addicted to technology, you get addicted to alcohol and other substances like cocaine, cannabis. So this is a feel-good addicting neurotransmitter. But it has good side? Yes. Mesocorticolimbic pathways in the brain, in the prefrontal cortex, help improving the working memory. Without dopamine, you cannot focus, you cannot have good sustained attention. Reduced dopamine concentrations in the prefrontal cortex are thought to be the reason for ADHD, or the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, found in children and now also in adults. Dopamine in the frontal lobes of brain controls the flow of information from other areas. Disorders of dopamine in this region, especially the prefrontal cortex, leads to decline in neurocognitive functions, executive functions of memory, attention, problem solving, sequencing. So it is a very important neurotransmitter for goal or target setting works. How do you increase dopamine? You give a goal and dopamine increases automatically. So goal setting, exercise, sunlight, meditation, good sleep, massage, music, tyrosine-rich foods. So all these increase dopamine. If you have less of dopamine, then you are not able to solve problems. You are not able to walk fast because it is important for movement. And if you have more of dopamine, you have a tendency to be dazed and you also sometimes hallucinate. So it is very important to have a delicate balance of dopamine, not so much, not too less. Next, we go to food for thought, literally. So imagine shortage of raw materials for making these hormones, happiness hormones. They are released by our activities only if they are present in enough quantities in food. We manufacture them with raw materials provided by our diet. Dietary requirements for well-being, mental well-being, I can go on for hours, but we will restrict ourselves here with the main dietary requirements for these three happiness hormones. So spicy foods for endorphins, yogurts, beans, eggs, meat, low fat content and almonds mostly release dopamine. Foods high in tryptophan for serotonin. Foods containing probiotics such as yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut are releasing these endorphins. You can try supplements for tyrosine linked to dopamine production, green tea extract for both dopamine and serotonin, probiotics again for dopamine and serotonin, and tryptophan for serotonin. Important here is vitamin D, sunlight, vitamin B12, vitamin B6, which serve as enzymes and catalysts for formation of these three neurohormones from their raw materials. Next, genes. Yes, there are happiness genes. Remember, if you have a family history of diabetes, you think you will get diabetes, but it is not so. One can stop activation of such family genes by having good lifestyle and good food. Food activates or deactivates right and wrong genes. Food is signal to these genes. So again, we have a lot of genes which make these neurotransmitters. If you have problems with these genes in your family and then you add up with a wrong lifestyle and faulty food, you may not feel happy and you may have a familial depression. Brain cleanup is again a very important aspect, because imagine now if you are working in an office where you are working day and night 24 hours with lots of employees, loads of work, and the place gets dirty. If not cleaned up regularly, it gets even dirtier, it stinks and affects your working condition. Now think of your brain as this office. It is working 24 hours. It is controlling so many functions of your body. It is going to create dirt which has to be cleaned up. If not done so, we suffer from brain fog, and that's why we see the incidence increasing of dementia or poor attention span. All lifestyle changes of wrong food, mobile screens, low physical activity, and excessive thinking and excessive thoughts cause toxin productions and toxin accumulation in the brain cells. Example, the commonest one is amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's dementia. So a cleanup mechanism for brain regularly is very important if you're going to tax it regularly with so much work and bombard it with so much information. And the cleanup is easy. Aimless walks, moderate exercise, healthy butyrate-rich food which cleans up the gut bacteria, that is raw food mostly, detox saunas, sunbathing, and supplements like melatonin or niacin. Now we go to the psychological well-being. In psychological well-being, we are talking about the mind. Believe me, brain is easier to understand. Mind is even tougher. Every individual has a mind of his own and as unique as your fingerprints. So there is one science which compares this to. It's called dermatoglyphics, which tells you from your fingerprints how your mind is. So let's try understanding the mind. According to Huppert, psychological well-being is about living going well. It is a combination of feeling good and functioning effectively. Huppert's review also claims the consequences of psychological well-being to include better physical health, mediated possibly by brain activation patterns, neurochemicals, genetic factors. So basically he talks about the interconnectedness. So he talks basically about these factors interacting with each other and how they have to be in sync with each other. The physical health, the brain health, the neurochemical health, the genetic health, and in turn the psychological health. Now we go ahead to further principles of psychological well-being. So we talk here now about Aristotle's approach. he called well-being as eudaimonia. Aristotle's formulation of the highest human good, which in his Nicomachean Ethics he called eudaimonia. He claimed that highest of all human good feeling is not happiness or good or satisfying appetites. Instead, it is about activities of the soul that are in accord with the virtue, which Aristotle elaborated to mean striving to achieve the best within us. So, eudaimonia captured the essence of two Greek imperatives. First, to know yourself, and second, to become what you are. Thus, we got two types of psychological well-being now. Hedonic well-being, which is the normal feel-good or feeling happy. It comprises of two components, an affective component, mood-wise, and a cognitive component, excitement-wise, interest-wise. Then we have the eudaimonic well-being put forth by Aristotle, which refers to the purposeful aspect of psychological well-being. Thus, we can classify now eudaimic well-being, meaning self-acceptance, environmental mastery, positive relationships, personal growth, purpose in life, and autonomy. Hedonic well-being means happiness, subjective well-being, positive emotions. We also have found the brain centers for these well-beings. Now here is where the mind connects to the brain. The hedonic well-being centers of the brain are the mesocortical limbic circuitry of the limbic system, nucleus accumbens, where dopamine is mostly found. Eudaimonic well-being centers are the right insular cortex, where serotonin is mostly found. We go further to the theories of psychological well-being. There are multiple theories put forth by different psychologists, psychoanalysts, and psychodynamic psychotherapists. We start with Rife's model. It is based on Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, where the goal of life isn't just feeling good, but is instead living virtuously. Now, Rife classified it further and put it into 6 key elements of psychological well-being: self-acceptance, personal growth, purpose in life, environmental mastery, autonomy, and positive relations to others. If we have all this, then only we feel good psychologically or in the mind. Next, we have the broaden and build theory by Fredrickson, put forth in 1998. Very interesting theory. Okay, so broaden and build theory integrates emotion theory into a well-being framework. The broaden effect makes the attentional focus wider and larger to include features of the surrounding. So it's called expansive attention and receptivity. This is associated with happiness, creativity, and generation of innovative problem solving or cognitive effects. This is where nature comes into picture. As we talked about expansive attention, visual spatial attention. So broadens the mind, opens the mind, and the creativity comes out. This was the broaden effect. Now, changing the way in which we consider ourselves in relation to others, also called as self-expansion. So we also go in depth as soon as we come in touch with a broadened or expansive attention. Not only does our mind focus more in depth on the surroundings or the environment, but it does focus more in depth inside us also about our self-awareness. Build effect. It refers to the accumulation of long-term psychological, physiological, and social resources consequential to the broaden effects. So once you have the broaden effects, then you build up resilience to significant loss or hardships and adversities in life, and you start coping better, and then you have a complete psychological well-being. Endowment and contrast model by Tversky and Griffin. Okay, this states that the quality of our past events affects the future and the present through a direct effect called endowment, and through an indirect effect called contrast that accounts for comparison between what is happening today as compared to what has happened before, putting up a reference standard. These standards are influenced by novelty, salience, and intensity of prior events. The crucial point of this model is that it decides psychological well-being on personal judgments. So, this does not rely on the environmental factors. It says your memories attached to a particular phenomenon can decide whether you can feel good. For example, here I would say if in my childhood I have been with a friend on a riverside and I have seen him drown. So when I go to the riverside now, it may not give me a feel-good phenomenon, though it is nature. Next is the Alan Waterman's personal expressive model. Okay, he put forth states of mind and subjective feelings that the individual can feel when he's engaged in activities, focused in activities, and engrossed in his personal goals and ambitions. It shows a deep involvement and a psychological fusion, contentment and satisfaction of truly what we are. This is very close to the flow experience described by Csikszentmihalyi. It is also what we have experienced in among singers or artists or writers, where they get lost and engrossed in their own personal psychological well-being of creativity. Then there are loads and loads of need theories, extrinsic needs, intrinsic needs. Individuals that strive for a life defined by affiliation, intimacy, and contributing to one's community have intrinsic psychological needs to fulfill. In contrast, those individuals who aspire for wealth, name, fame, money, and image and attractiveness have extrinsic psychological needs. There are furthermore need theories which put forth by many other psychiatrists and psychologists are need for autonomy, need for environmental mastery, need for personal growth, need for positive relations with others, need for purpose. Again, going back to the Aristotle's concept. Plus, further there are need for maturity, executive processing, basic life tendencies, willing to meaning. So furthermore theories. So we see that psychological well-being is a tougher nut. It is not easy to gain psychological well-being unless and until we are completely in charge of what we want, what we know, what we have. So it is the main culprit which stops us from being happy in spite of having a happiness center in every brain. Then comes the physical well-being. Okay, imagine you are having a beautiful, nice, lovely walk in the woods or in the meadows, and you have heavy migrainous headache, throbbing with nausea. How can you experience the beauty of nature? Again, imagine you are climbing up or sitting beside a beautiful river, but your knees are aching, sore because of your osteoarthritis. Can you get the complete happy experience from the nature? So physical well-being is also equally important. Aches and pains, no rest, poor sleep, poor nourishment, deficiencies of multivitamins or minerals, or disease states all affect the brain and the psychology of every person. And again, as these are interconnected, it affects the well-being in totality. So physical well-being, if not, then we cannot have the neural well-being and the psychological well-being. So psychological well-being leads to physical well-being leads to bioregulation in the brain, mental well-being, and mental well-being leads to cognitive well-being and better performance. And this interconnectedness makes it really a tough challenge to be happy and having feelings of well-being all the time. Thus, mental well-being is a state of equilibrium in the brain or neuroscience. Every aspect of this mind-body-brain unit should be satisfied and in a state of homeostasis. Our body thrives on homeostasis or a state of equilibrium. How do we get it? I leave you here with the thought that if good fuel and regular servicing keeps your vehicle in a good condition. Then, fuel of great thoughts, healthy natural food, and servicing with moderate physical activity and helping others keeps the vehicle of your soul in good condition too. Thank you.